Yes, I don't care if you're not in school anymore. You see that big stack of books behind me? You should read them. At least that's the argument that Northrop Frye makes in this book here, The Educated Imagination. And I did a summary review slash essay style thing for the newsletter, which is coming out in 2 days. Today is March 30th. So yeah, April 1st. Not a prank. It is coming out April 1st. So please do subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff, whatever. Anyways, yes, the main thrust of the essay of the month is about Northrop Frye's book, The Educated Imagination, which is pretty slim, okay, pretty short little book. The lectures in here were originally given as like radio broadcasts. Apparently Canada used to do this thing called Massey lectures, where eminent scholars in Canada would, give lectures on the radio. Now radio is kind of a thing of the past. People don't really listen to the radio anymore. But anyway, this book. So Northrop Frye wants to make the argument that classics and literature is an essential component of everyone's not existence, but just life in general, regardless of whether or not you are sort of interested in scholarly things. So he begins the book by asking, well, what is the study of English, right? Because that's something we all have in school, right? Even all the way through elementary, junior high, high school. I don't know if you're in America, you call it middle school, whatever. Everyone takes English. Now, that's kind of a nebulous topic because we use English to communicate, of course, but communication is not the same thing as reading Catcher in the Rye, right? Those are kind of two different things, or Shakespeare, right? Those are very different forms of English. Northrop Frye points out three main types of language that people use and helps kind of differentiate them. And so the first is the language of self-expression. So if you are monologuing about something, not to anyone else, but rather to yourself, you're talking to yourself, or you are talking to somebody else about how you feel, or about the food you ate last night, or the weather, that is the language of self-expression. It's kind of like the base level. Then, on top of that, there is the language of practical sense. This is sort of technical language. So if I was a lawyer explaining the law to you, or a doctor, or some other sort of person with technical knowledge, then I would be using the language of practical sense. That is the second type. Now, the third type of language is literary language, okay? This is the language of poems, plays, novels, sort of more artistic language. Now, of course, people in school should learn all three types of language, right? You should learn how to properly express yourself. Of course, I hope you pick that up kind of on your own. You should know how to communicate technically, right? Write a good email, explain a concept to somebody. That's very important. But Northrop Frye argues that the third type of language is also very important and should not be neglected, even if you're not interested in scholarly stuff. And that's because literary language is the language of the imagination. And in order to strengthen this faculty that everyone has, this imaginative faculty, you have to read. And the reason being is because, I'll get to that in a minute. The reason that the imagination is important is because it allows us to envision the life that we could live. So he makes this basic distinction between the life that we are living, the world we are currently in, and the world we could be in, or the world we would like to live in. And in order for somebody not to become a victim of circumstance or a victim of their own society, they should have an educated imagination, right? That's where he gets the title of the book. They should be able to envision a better life for themselves, or envision at least an alternate lifestyle. And he, in this discussion, he brings up the idea of a social myth. So or a societal myth. Every society or every social group has myths. Okay, myths does not mean they're untrue. It just means that these are like sort of the prevailing narratives that inform the values and overarching views of the society, right? So if you're thinking about first world North American societies, we have many myths, right? Again, doesn't mean they're untrue, just means that they kind of direct our vision and kind of reveal our priorities. And so some myths of North America would be the myth of democracy, right? Or the myth that money equals happiness, or the myth of meritocracy, right? If you work hard, you'll get to the top. The myth of the good old days, right? How America in the 1950s used to be like a roaring great place, and then it kind of got worse from there, like societal sort of crumbling. Or the myth that Humanity used to be like idiot cavemen, and we kind of were drawn out of that lifestyle into this like smart and opulent enlightenment, right? Those are all social myths that North American people hold. And so these myths may work for many people, right? They may go through their whole life not questioning these things, and they end up happy, right? Awesome. Some people, though, end up very disillusioned, right? They sort of buy into these myths, and it doesn't make them happy, and they end up miserable, have a midlife crisis or whatever, and it doesn't work out so well. So the reason why people should read is because you might be one of these people that society's social myths don't work for you. And so if you have an educated imagination, you're able to envision an alternate lifestyle for yourself, and not one that is kind of impoverished in its own way, but something that's truly fulfilling, right? So the archetype I'm thinking of somebody who isn't well-read, but has this intuition that North American societal myths don't cut it, is they go out and buy a sports car, right? That's the midlife crisis of the average office working man in America. They kind of realize that, they have this this nostalgia or FOMO for the unlived life. They kind of want to reclaim their manhood or joie de vivre from their teenage years, is to go out and buy a sports car. Now, pro tip, it's probably not the missing ingredient, but the person that does this doesn't read, right? So they think that the sports car will fix everything. In addition to imagining an alternate lifestyle and being able to question social beliefs, society's myths as a whole, as a group, are also constituted by the beliefs of its citizens. And so if we want to build a strong society in the future, granted this is over like a long time scale, but citizens should be well read, even if their social myths work for them, because social myths change over time. And so it's good to have an educated society or populace that is able to support the creation of healthy, good myths. And if you don't have that, then you have a society that's delusional, or it's in decline. It's crumbling because the social myths are failing people and there's no one to create new ones. So yeah, anyways, literature, super important. Okay, we have that down pat. What should we read, right? We can't just read anything. What should we read? So Northrop Frye anticipates this question, and he believes that, here, I think I have some quotes in the book here. He believes that people should start like early, like in elementary, learning poetry and the Bible. Now, you may be confused because poetry you think is like the advanced thing, and people shouldn't start with poetry, like kids won't get it. But in fact, I think this is because maybe you misunderstand poetry. Poetry is not like a puzzle, okay? It's not like a Sudoku. You can't rearrange the pieces, or you get the skeleton key and you can unlock the poem, and it's something to be like discovered or unscrambled, okay? That's not what a poem is. I have a good quote from Frye here on the nature of poetry. See if I can, I've got too many bookmarks, so I'm not sure if I can find it. Here it is. It says, "Poetry is the most direct and simple means of expressing oneself in words. The most primitive nations have poetry, but only quite well-developed civilizations can produce good prose. So don't think of poetry as a perverse and unnatural way of distorting ordinary prose statements. Prose is a much less natural way of speaking than poetry is." So, yeah, starting with poetry, and then also the Bible. So Northrop Frye, I'm not sure if he was a Christian in the ordinary sense, but in this book he's not speaking as a Christian, and actually you don't have to be a Christian to agree with him. In fact, he's speaking only as a literary critic, and so he's quite eloquent on this point as well. So I'm gonna read another quote here. So this is a quote by Frye about why the Bible should be taught at an early age. He says, "The most complete form of this myth is given by the Christian Bible, and so the Bible forms the lowest stratum in the teaching of literature. It should be taught so early and so thoroughly that it sinks straight to the bottom of the mind, where everything that comes along later can settle on it. That, I am aware, is a highly controversial statement, and can be misunderstood in all kinds of ways, so please remember that I'm speaking as a literary critic about the teaching of literature. There are all sorts of secondary reasons for teaching the Bible as literature, such as the fact that it's so endlessly quoted from and alluded to, the fact that the cadences and phrases of the King James translation are built into our minds and our way of thought, the fact that it's full of the greatest and best known stories we have, and so on. There are also the moral and religious reasons for its importance, which are different reasons. But in the particular context in which I'm speaking now, it's the total shape and structure of the Bible which is most important. The fact that it's a continuous narrative beginning with the creation and ending with the last judgment, and surveying the whole history of mankind, under the symbolic names of Adam and Israel in between. In other words, it's the myth of the Bible that should be the basis of literary training. Its imaginative survey of the human situation, which is so broad and comprehensive that everything else finds its place inside it. So yeah, start with poetry in the Bible. Next up, Frye thinks that the students in like junior high age, maybe a bit earlier as well, should learn classical mythology. This one, of course, because so much of the Western tradition also makes many allusions to classical mythology, so it's hard to know what's going on if you, say, read Milton, unless you know some classical mythology. Another reason would be there are many other stories and archetypes and plot lines in classical mythology that aren't in the Bible, so it's good in that sense as well, to kind of expand a little bit. And then after you read poetry, Bible, and classical mythology, then in high school age, you should be looking into the literary forms. Now, according to Frye, there are 4 main literary forms. There's romance, there's comedy, there's tragedy, and there's irony. Now, Frye thinks it's okay for kind of younger age to read the lighthearted ones, so comedy and romance, but he wants to reserve the sort of more complex or nuanced forms of irony and tragedy for high school age students. And when Frye refers to these kind of genres, he's not talking about romance as like chick flicks, like guy and a girl kind of kiss in the rain. Like that's not what a romance is. According to Frye, romance is more so the overall structure of the plot. So a romance would be something where the setting is idealized, and the plot kind of resolves itself in either like the death of the enemy or the marriage of 2 characters, and society is sort of restored to its like rightful state. Right. This is like a romance. Yeah. So that's basically the main thrust of the argument in his book, The Educated Imagination. So yeah, in summary, there's 3 types of language, right? The third type, literary, that's the type that we have in Shakespeare and Steinbeck and things like that. And the reason that we should read it is because it educates our imagination, which allows us to imagine an alternate lifestyle for ourselves, and also to help to contribute towards the myths of our society, to strengthen it and make it better for future generations. And we should do that by reading poetry, Bible, classical mythology, and the literary forms, primarily in the classics. Of course, if you have spare time, you can read contemporary stuff, but according to Frye, you should stick with the classics first. So I would say he's correct. I think he nails it. So yeah, good book. Pretty short, so yeah, I'd recommend it. Otherwise, oh, I totally missed with that. See you next month. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to the newsletter.